Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be dialing into crayfish, and I want to talk about the traditional jig, the classic jig that was originally designed to represent a crayfish. Now today I want to take that original jig and not think of it as a finished product, but something that is a work in progress. We're not fishing for a new bait, we're fishing for new perspective. So with that, let's sit down. I'll take a look at that traditional jig. We'll bend some rules and we'll see what we come up with. Let's do it. I hope you've shown up with an open mind today, because today we're going to be stepping away from tradition and we're going to lean more towards innovation. I'm not here to talk you from point A to point B. Bass fishing doesn't work that way. There's never a clear-cut beginning or a clear-cut ending. Bass fishing never presents itself as a neat little one-size-fits-all package. Let's start with the traditional jig, and I think we need to understand where we've been to appreciate where we're going. I'll start with a few simple modifications that are designed to enhance the classic jig. Now, once we've gone over basic modifications, we're going to walk away from traditional thinking. We'll end the video with a modification that I think will really change the way that you look at jig fishing. Let's start at the beginning with the classic jig. It looks something like this. This happens to be a football head jig. The original jigs that came out in the 60s were Arky jigs. They had a little different shaped head, but primarily it was a lead head connected to a standard hook. They had some weed guard on it. They wrapped a skirt around it, and the original jigs basically were used with pork trailers. Now, I've got an imitation here, and this isn't, obviously it's not a real crayfish, but this is a very realistic imitation. And I can tell you that over the years, especially the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been a lot of very realistic imitations of crayfish come out, and I've been one of those suckers that bought most of them. And I look at it and I think this thing ought to just catch fish right and left, and they just don't do it. I've never had a really realistic looking crayfish that caught many fish. Go back to this guy here. Does it look like a crayfish? It could be the same size, it could be the same color, but it's just not the appearance. It's the way that this jig moves. It's the living rubber, whatever it is. These old style jigs just catch a lot of fish. Everything that we have available to us, we need to think about and put it into a package and see what we can do to come up with a better jig. Let's start talking about some of our basic modifications. The first modification I want to talk about is what I call basically just a naked jig. This is what we're going to be looking at. And you're looking at this, and we're looking at our original jig here. And you might say, when is a jig, the traditional jig here, and when does this become a jig? Or when does this stop being a jig and something like this becomes a jig? Well, I think you have to be really open-minded. To me, these are both jigs. They're both going to be fished right along the bottom, slowly. They're going to be twitched and manipulated to represent a crayfish crawling across the bottom. So let's put the traditional jig down and we'll talk about this. Now, the hook that I have, that I'm using here, is a BKK. They call it a Permalock weighted hook. The weight in this bait is actually in the body of the bait. This is what the hook looks like. And if you can picture this weight, we'll actually re-rig this bait for you. There's the weight. We simply push our basically trailer or plastic, and we texpose the hook, and we have a naked bait. This will sink because it's weighted. The advantage of this is that, number one, it's much more weedless. It doesn't have a weed guard. The hook is texposed, so I think this particular version, you have a much better hookup rate because you don't have anything really impeding the point of the hook. We've got a wider gap hook. We've got a hook that's a little, just as strong, but it's made out of a little less diameter in the wire or the steel that they're making the hook. So I really believe that this is in itself a upgrade from the standard jig. And we're talking about, is it an upgrade on every situation? No. But there's a lot of times when fish are keyed into just less than more. Now, if we have this Permalock hook here where the weight is in here, we can always take this, and one of the first modifications you might want to do is take a skirt. And by the way, didn't talk about this, but you can buy pre-made skirts that have a little hole in the middle, and we can take this and just simply put this threaded on the line. Once we have the skirt on, we'd put a stopper on it so that the skirt doesn't float up. But what we have now is something that starts to look like your standard jig. The only difference is it doesn't have a weed guard on it. We've got that weight in the middle of the in the bait instead of the head. So this is going to fall not so much in a direction straight down, it's going to kind of float down a little bit, and as it comes across the bottom, it's going to not dig in. So these things tend to get hooked up a little less, and a lot of times by putting a skirt on like this, it will also help to pull it through rocks and through vegetation. So this is the first thing that we'd talk about, just kind of that a naked rig right there. If we wanted to put a skirt on it, it becomes a skirted naked rig. So let's talk about the next modification we're going to do, and this happens to be with your standard, what I call a T-rig. And what we do here is we have on this particular modification, we have a standard extra wide gap hook. You can use an inline hook. You can use any type of hook modification you want, but we're putting, it's an unweighted hook. We're putting our trailer on it. The trailer can be a beaver. It could be anything you want. And the line is connected. We're going to drop a skirt on it, and then we're going to put a T-rigged weight on it and then a stopper so that the weight is pegged down here. Now again, this is getting closer and closer to that traditional jig. Now the advantages of this, you have a bait that I think has a better hookup ratio, because once again you don't have the weed guard in front of the point of the hook impeding the progress of that point to dig into a fish's mouth. So when a fish grabs this, you set hook, you got the fish. You have obviously the choice of hundreds, if not thousands, of different colors and sizes of plastic, along with skirt combinations. And you also have, you know, a number of different options when it comes to weight. This happens to be a tungsten weight. You can put a brass weight on this, or you can put the standard lead head. All of these baits, when they are pulled along the bottom, have a built-in problem of hanging up. You're never going to get away from using jigs and using them aggressively, especially when you're in rock, without losing some of these jigs. If you're fishing them like that, you probably need a bait knocker. We'll go over bait knockers at a different video. But anyhow, this is kind of your standard T-rig option. You know what? I've decided to do a little bonus coverage right here. We do have a fourth and final modification that is going to be the meat and potatoes of this video, and that fourth modification is the one that's really going to change your mind on how you think about fishing jigs. But before we do, I want to talk to you guys and maybe introduce you to another hook and a bait that is kind of forgotten. This is called a weighted tube hook. It's got it's not a spear point hook. The weights in it are a little different, and they're designed to hold tubes. And one of the things that that's kind of a forgotten bait is a tube, and this tube can really represent a crayfish very well. So this is what we're going to do with this weighted tube hook. A lot of times you have to grease up your tube a little bit. It could be any tube that you have, and you're just going to poke this weight, and it's going to go inside the bait like this. We're going to texpose the tube so that it's like this, and that is your standard tube. You can fish it naked. Oops, You can fish this thing naked, just like it is, but think about this. This is something that I've used over the years, and I've kind of gotten away from using it, but every time I'm in a pinch and I want to try something different, I'll take this tube. Now that we have this weighted tube hook, you don't have to put a weight on the front of it. All you have to do is put yourself one of the skirts on, put a stopper on here, and look at this. You've got a good looking jig. Now, what is the advantage of this? If you guys are on a budget, you can buy tubes in any color and any size, and a lot of times they come 10, 12 in a package, and they're only about $3. They are much less expensive to buy than standard plastic trailers. So if you haven't tried this, think about that weighted tube hook with a nice color tube on it and a matching skirt or whatever, and you can go with that. That's a little bonus coverage. All right, here we go. It's time for the big bang, and if you guys take away anything from this video, I want you to take away what we're going to be talking about coming up right here. And I want to start off by saying this modification, more than any other, will expand the way you think about fishing these jigs, and it will open up the water that you fish, the number of fish that you catch, and it'll just give you a different perspective on how you fish what we're going to call a jig. Now, listen very closely to what I say. It's very important. Crayfish don't always crawl along the bottom. Crayfish will swim through open water. I just said it, and I said it to your face. This is important. And if you don't think that crayfish swim in open water, I want you all to think about maybe the past few years, how many fish you've caught on crankbaits in open water. And then I want you to think about your favorite color crankbait. Most of you, in your top 3, your favorite color crankbait is going to be a crayfish. Bass do chase crayfish in open water, and those are the bass that we need to be thinking about right now. I like to use the Owner Flashy Swimmer. It's a weighted hook with an underspin. Now, I also have some of these on a BKK underspin. It's a weighted underspin. This happens to be one of the Bronco bugs that's on here. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a standard jig, plastic jig trailer, and we're going to fish it on this Flashy Swimmer. So I'll try to stay away from, I'll say, beaver style baits that have appendages that don't have a lot of motion in them. So the one that I'm using here is a 6 cents bait. It's called a bodega, and you see the legs are real long on them, and they're going to really give you a lot of animation. Another bait that would be good is that G-Rat Dixie clip. This is what that one looks like, but just something that has some animation, because we are going to fish this bait a lot faster and we want fish to attack it and chase it. So what we're going to do is simply use the screw lock, and we're going to screw it on here, and it's pretty darn simple. We're just going to put that guy on there, and that's what we have. You can fish it naked just like this, and what you're going to do with this is you're going to cast it out, you're going to reel it in just like it was a crankbait. You can stop it, you can start it, you can do whatever you want with it, and basically it turns into a plastic crankbait. Now, another thing, if you think it needs to look more like a jig, you can once again take your one of your skirts, and you could put it on this and peg it, and you can run that right across the bottom. You can bring it up off the bottom. You could pitch it into stuff like we have behind us and pull it over the top and then let it drop down. But with this little bit of flash down here and these tails just undulating in the water, the fish are suckers for these things, and it just opens up these plastic crayfish imitations to so much more water. And here on the California Delta, we may be fishing like what we have behind us right here, very heavy cover, bam, bam, bam. We're kind of pitching it in and fishing it like a jig. And then we may come up to a dock that we want to maybe have this on so that we can fish it right down the edge of the dock. Or maybe we'll find a rock bank with a trough in it, and we don't want to have this thing sitting down in the rocks. Now, we can drop this into the rocks. It can get hung up just like a standard jig, but we don't have to fish this like a standard jig. We can throw it down in the trough. We could, just kind of twitch it back to the boat. We can reel it in quick. We can reel it in slow. And it's the possibilities are endless. And hopefully what I've done today, like I said, I've thrown a lot out there. You can look at the deck, take what you want, leave the rest, but change your perspective on how you fish the standard jig. I don't want you to ever not have the standard jig in your arsenal, but think about changing the perspective on how you put these things together, the hooks that you use, the skirts that you use, the plastics that you use, underspins, tubes. There's just so much more that you can do with this jig. I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. I try to answer all the questions that you may have if I left something out. And with that, go out, give them a try. Let me know how you do. We'll see you guys on the river sometime. Good luck.